Well, so good to have Dr. Paul Chitwood with me in studio today. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you, Pastor Jarrett. Grateful for you, for Champion Forest, for all the Lord is doing here.
Well, you have been a great friend through the years, and I know that our friendship is developing more and more and more as the days go by, and just so grateful for your leadership with the International Mission Board. Here you are in your 5th year, I believe the 13th president of the International Mission Board. And we're going to talk about International Mission Board stuff here in a moment. But I want to get personal with you. You know, people that listen to this podcast, they know me, they know our church, and obviously are familiar with Southern Baptist work going on all over the country. And you're such a big part of that because of the work of the International Mission Board. But I want to know about you, Dr. Paul Chitwood. I want to know personal information. And so let's start. I want you to take me back to your salvation. I want to know a little bit about how you grew up and when you came to know Christ. I think people love hearing these stories because, again, from the outside, we see you leading this huge missions organization, 3,500 plus missionaries. But I think the roots of where you grew up, how you came to know Christ, say so much about you. So just fill in the blanks for us. Catch us up.
I appreciate that opportunity. The Lord is so kind to find us. And he found me in a little town called Jellicoe, Tennessee. It's around Tennessee-Kentucky line. Half the town's in Kentucky, but most people, it's a small town with about 2,000. But I guess the story starts best with when I was 2, my younger brother 1, older brother 4. Our mother left our family, and so our father raised us from then on, single dad with the help of his parents. He grew up in a very impoverished area in the mountains, but was working for the telephone company, spent 45 years working for the telephone company. And so his mother helped him out as he was raising us. We just had a knock on our door one day. We was living in a little rental house, and there was a couple of men from a local Baptist church there in town who were out on church visitation night, inviting people to come to church, and knocked on our door, gave an invitation to my dad, asking if he would come to church. And so that next Sunday, he managed to get 3 rowdy boys ready. I guess at the time we were ages 3, 4, and 6.
So there's 3 brothers.
3 brothers, yeah.
And y'all had not grown up in church, no background in church.
No, that's accurate. That's accurate. Wow. And Dad had, I think he'd been to a church camp when he was a kid. And when things were getting rough in his marriage, he had gone a few times and tried to, get the pastor working with in his marriage to try to get things fixed. But this invitation, I mean, it changed everything. It changed everything. He started taking us to church on a regular basis, and the church, just a little congregation. I don't know, when things were going well, he might have 140, 150 people there. Usually it was 80, 90, 100. But they embraced us, welcomed us in, and looking back on it, really helped raise us. The church family was just so good to us. And the Lord used that to awaken my older brother to the gospel. He began to ask questions. Some years later, Dad asked our pastor if he would come and visit with my older brother, which he did. He came to our house and sat in the green chair in the corner of our living room. Dad brought a chair out of the kitchen, sat it in front of him. Pastor Allen Herod was his name. He shared the gospel with my older brother. My younger brother and I were listening in. We were sitting on the floor listening in, and the Lord grabbed all of us that night. As the 3 of us felt the need for a Savior. We made our profession of faith, baptized together just a few weeks later at the little First Baptist Church of Jellicoe. I was probably 9 or 10 at that point, and that we continued in church. There was some, just from a broken family, a broken little community, really, a rough little mountain town. There was some time in my high school years when I was struggling with obedience. And Lord used a good car wreck to get my attention with that and my brother's attention. And I made a recommitment in my life when I was a teenager. And then it wasn't long thereafter, the Lord called me into ministry.
Wow. I love the fact that you grew up in this small church and a faithful pastor, faithful layman come to the house to share Christ, to just extend an invitation to your dad, and it changes an entire family. And the sovereignty of God, and that they had no idea that the future president of the International Mission Board would be in that home. And that's just amazing. And I love, I think that's the success of Southern Baptist in so many ways, is because we hear a lot about the big churches all across the country, and they're doing great work.
Thank God for them.
Yeah,
Yes,
but
yes.
it's the small Southern Baptist churches. I think about my grandparents. My great-granddad built the Southern Baptist Church in a small town in South Mississippi.
Oh, wow.
That my dad was raised in, that he ended up trusting Christ in. I preached one of my first sermons there. And I can remember my mama loved giving to the Lottie Moon Christmas offering because
Yes.
she knew that she was helping her grandson, get his education at Southern Baptist universities and seminaries. And I just think it's the beauty of the small church. And you're right. When you're a part of these small churches, and I was a part of one growing up, I tell our new member class here at Champion Forest, we'll have 100 people in a new members class. And I tell them to start, I say, you do understand that the church I grew up in could fit in the room that we're in right now. And this is like high attendance Sunday for us. And I'm just so grateful for the heritage of those churches and just what they mean to so many people like yourself who grew up in great Bible preaching, Jesus exalting, Spirit-filled churches committed to sharing the gospel and discipling people. It's the beauty of the church. And so you trust Christ and you sense a call to ministry.
Yes.
And so I know you pastored for a while in some churches in Kentucky and then served as the executive director of the Baptist Convention in Kentucky. Get us to the International Mission Board, that calling, because here you are pastoring a local church. Did you ever see that International Mission Board thing coming?
Oh, no. It was interesting the way the Lord worked, though, looking back on it. Very first church I pastored was a little rural seminary church, and I hadn't been there very long, and our what we call today Associational Mission Strategist, then we called a DOM, the Director of Missions, George Stack, knocked on my door at the parsonage where my wife and I were living, said they were going to have a World Missions Conference in the association, where they would have a different missionary speaker in your church every night, sort of like a revival schedule, Sunday to Wednesday or Thursday or what have you, and wanted to know if South Fork Baptist Church, where I was pastoring about 40 or 50 souls there, if we wanted to participate. And I thought that sounded good. I didn't know a lot about missions, Southern Baptist missions and missionaries. And so that ended up being such a impactful experience on me as we had a missionary share every night of those services. Went to supper with them, got to know them, hear their story, and the Lord began to capture my heart for mission work. But I pastored 18 years and was teaching at seminary some. There was another real turning point for me. I guess in 2002, I was pastoring at First Baptist Church, Somerset, Kentucky, and finishing up my PhD. I was invited to be a trustee on the International Mission Board. So I didn't know what that meant or what that would take, but said sure. Had such an incredible learning experience in front of me that I wasn't even aware of. What Southern Baptists do through their mission boards is really, it's phenomenal. It's just so incredible. For 177 years now, Southern Baptist has been sending missionaries to the nation. We've sent more than 25,000 missionaries through the IMB. But the IMB is a big organization. So coming from a small town and, pastoring small, mid-sized churches, I had no framework for an international organization with, at the time, $250 million in revenue, 6,000 employees working in 150 plus countries of the world. So it was just jaw-dropping to me when I began to show up at board meetings and see, gosh, what God is doing, and begin to understand how an organization like that operates. But also as a part of those board meetings, we had a sending celebration at every board meeting. And just like you came and preached for a sending celebration recently for us, Pastor Jarrett, as a board member, I would go to those. And it was very difficult to sit through those time after time after time, hear the stories of those God has called, and learn more about places they were going where there was no gospel witness. It was very difficult for me to go back home and preach to the church family in a town and an association with 50 Baptist churches and just lots of access to the gospel. And it brought myself and my wife really to a point of crisis. Is the Lord calling us to go? And we wrestled with that and sought counsel of missionaries and dear friends of our lives and prayed and put our yes on the table. Lord, we're willing to. Ultimately, the Lord made it just very clear that He was not calling us to go, but He was calling us to send. And so that changed everything about our ministry. I began to pastor my church differently. I began to preach my sermons differently. I began to teach in a seminary classroom differently. Everything was different when I realized, God really has called all of us either to go or to send, and to realize what that looked like for me as a local church pastor and a teacher in the classroom. So fast forward a bit from that, and I was invited after pastoring 18 years to serve with Kentucky Baptist Convention, sort of lead the state mission work. And really my motivation for saying yes is I wanted to have a greater impact overseas, and I knew that state conventions were beautifully positioned to rally mission support and mobilizing people not only to reach their state but to reach the nations. So I accepted that call of the board and the Lord and served in that role for 7 years. Was really caught off guard when the Lord extended the call for us to come and serve with the IMB. But I look back and see, again, the different things the Lord was doing along the way to sort of prepare us, if you can be prepared to be IMB president. It's a bit of an overwhelming assignment. But the Lord indeed had done some unique things along the way. And we feel so privileged. I tell our missionaries that I'm in the role for essentially this reason, in line with the call of God. I'm in the role as IMB president to do everything that I can do to ensure that our missionaries have everything they need to do what God has called them to do. So raising the support here at home, building strong relationships with churches and pastors, associations, state conventions, making sure Southern Baptist's heart for the nations continues to beat strong, and the resources that are at our disposal are used well. We steward those well to get the gospel to those who haven't heard and support those missionaries who are laying their life on the line.
Yeah, well, you're doing a great job, and I tell everybody, sometimes Southern Baptists can get a bad rap, and sometimes we deserve that, and we earn it rightly, right? But I tell them, as long as it relates to our International Mission Board and the North American Mission Board, our two mission entities, there is such great confidence because of the leadership that you and Kevin Ezell bring to the table, and I'm just so grateful for what you do. You mentioned that sending celebration, and I think for every person that goes to the convention in the summers or attends a sending celebration at another point is a highlight. It's why we go. It's always a reminder to me. You get there and you're in the business part of the SBC and you're thinking, why am I here? But then the sending celebration comes, and it's always a reminder of this is what it's all about.
What brought us together.
It is, and it's what's going to keep us together. And we're just so grateful to be able to partner with the International Mission Board. So give us an update on it, how many missionaries we have right now, just how the organization's doing. A lot of people listening are passionate about getting the gospel to the nations. And so update us on the IMB.
Well, things are going really well. We have about 3,550 missionaries currently serving overseas. There's about 2,850 kids in those missionary families that Southern Baptist is supporting. And so we thank God for the generosity of churches like yours, Pastor Jarrett, and so many others who are part of this work, making a tremendous impact. What we do together is always greater than what we could do on our own. And the synergy that comes, the exponential impact of Southern Baptist working together can be seen just in, there's some data points that we track with very regularly. How many people heard the gospel through our missionaries and those they've discipled in the churches they've planted overseas. And this past year, there's over 500,000 people heard the gospel overseas. 176,000 professions of faith resulting from that gospel witness, and then 107,000 new believers baptized among those who professed faith. 22,000 new churches started. Again, the reach, none of us could do that. No church, even a church as wonderful and as significant as impact as Champion Force, no church could do that on their own. But what we're able to do together, and we give stronger support to our missionaries and take a lot of worries off of them because we work together, and the gospel gets further. We're grateful as we're together addressing the world's greatest problem that we know the solution. and that solution is the gospel. How does the gospel get to a lost world? Through missionaries, a missionary presence. The Bible says, Apostle Paul says in Romans 10, beautiful are the feet of those who preach the gospel. So it's a beautiful feet of the missionaries that we're sending to the nations, and we're excited about the opportunity to do that.
Well, that was my next question. What are you most excited about? I know in an organization like yours, you've always got projects that you're working on and new endeavors that you're launching. What is most exciting to you these days?
So one of the things we're really going to be focusing in on over the next few years, and we're going to launch it strongly at the convention annual meeting this coming summer, is we don't necessarily have a name for it. Internally, we've been calling it Project 3000, but the focus is on the 3,000 remaining unreached and unengaged people groups. How do we engage them with the gospel? So to that end, we're going to create 100 new jobs a year over the next 3 years, 300 jobs. Each one of those jobs is going to be assigned 10. Each one of those missionaries in the job is going to be assigned 10 of the UUPGs, unreached, unengaged people groups. The assignment is research them, find them, if possible, make contact with them, build a strategy to engage them. So it'll be about a 2 to 3 year assignment. We think that it will be appealing maybe to our younger missionary crowd because this is kind of edgy work and research and getting out to some hard to reach places. But hey, we'll be glad to engage anybody who wants to engage the unreached and unengaged in these roles. And so those roles are going to, we pray and hope, sort of propel us to finishing the task, to getting to those places and those people we've not been able to get to. Our hope is as well that, especially as maybe people come into those 2 or 3 year assignments, that the Lord would capture their heart for those people groups, that they'd be willing to give their lives to reaching them as a career missionary. We're in a great position financially. The generosity of Southern Baptist just in the last couple of years has been growing. It's been great because it's positioning us to be able to grow a mission force again. So we went through a very difficult period, about 2008 to 2018, when we lost 40% of our mission force because of financial struggles that the board was having. But coming out of that, we're positioned to grow again. So we're recruiting hard and hoping we see more and more people answer the call and serve through the IMB.
So when you talk about reaching the unreached, unengaged people groups, I know listening to our podcast, this conversation right now that we're having, is kind of twofold. You got pastors that are listening in that want to lead their churches to be more aggressive in helping to reach those unengaged people groups. And then you have people who are on their way to work, listening, working out, wherever they may be, and they're thinking, I want to be a part of that. Mm-hmm. And so speak twofold to that, Dr. Chitwood, if you would. What could a pastor listening do to engage their church and really help further that ministry, to whether it's prayer, giving, going, whatever that may look like, and then to the person who's saying, man, I want to do something personally. What does that look like?
So we talk about 4 things for local church and individual Southern Baptists: pray, give, go, and send. Pray for the lost among the nations. Give generously of what God's allowed you to steward to support missionaries. Go on a mission trip, or if God is calling you, go as a career missionary. And if God isn't calling you to go, He's certainly calling you to send. It's either or. Mm-hmm. He's either calling us to go or He's calling us to send. One of the things that we took a close look at just a couple of years ago was how do we instill that, particularly in the rising generation? How's the Great Commission handed off? And we found some information that I think has been very helpful to pastors who want to see their churches more engaged. And it's things that we maybe intuitively assumed were true. We found in a project with Barna Research, we found that indeed they are true, that the 2 most impactful things that you can do as a pastor, as a church, to ensure that your church members, next generation or not, that they're engaged, that they're a part of this work. The 2 most impactful things you can do is, 1, get them on a mission trip, or 2, let them get to know missionaries personally. When either of those things have happened, if a person has been on a mission trip or they personally know a missionary, here's what impact it has. They tend to give, on average, 4 times as much to missions. They tend to pray 4 times as often for the lost among the nations and for mission work and missionaries, and they're 4 times as likely to become a missionary. So if you want to have a fourfold increase,
that's really good.
And the hearts of your people for what they're doing and praying, giving, going, sending, get them on a mission trip, and have a relationship with missionaries. Bring them into your church. Let them get to know them. And we're trying to help with that, focusing our missionaries. We're assigning all of our missionaries a portfolio of churches they're building relationships with. And that's really helping us see, I think, lift across the organization, and it's for the sake of the nations.
All right. Well, you talk about things that you're excited about. I know with any organization of any size, you have challenges as well. Yeah. And so we have been talking just in our time together about the pipeline and how it's such a need to get more missionaries in the pipeline. Talk a little bit about that and the challenges that you're facing as it relates to get more missionaries on the field.
So that's our biggest push right now with the 300 jobs, with other things we're doing to create opportunities for people to go because the resources are there for them to be supported. What we need is more candidates who are answering the call. So my encouragement to pastors and to those who work with all age groups in the church, especially your younger adults, call out the call. Lay down, as you offer an invitation, people to come to Christ, people to join the church, people to be baptized, include a call to ministry and a call to the nations. We want to see more young men and women raised up into ministry. I love what you're doing here at Champion Force, nurturing those young men and along the pathway of ministry. So we want to see more of that spreading across the convention and just a greater awareness of the needs and the opportunities among the nations. So that's a big thing for us. We need more missionary candidates, and with God has provided the resources, we want to see those resources used to get more missionaries on the field, because we know more missionaries on the field simply means more people hear the gospel. The gospel gets further, faster as missionaries go and take it.
Yeah, well, I can't recommend the International Mission Board as an organization enough because of the work that y'all are doing and your leadership. And how can we pray for you, Dr. Chitwood? I know your wife, Michelle, you got 4 kids, you got a busy schedule, you're traveling like crazy. I know you're getting ready to go overseas here as we're having this conversation. How can we be praying for you?
The request that's always on the tip of my tongue when anybody asks that question, Pastor Jarrett, is pray for wisdom. Leading the IMB is far beyond me and our leadership team. So the Bible says anybody be in need of wisdom, let him ask. So please pray on our behalf. Ask the Lord would give godly wisdom to me, to our leadership team, and to our missionaries. Desperately, we long to know that He is leading us in where we're leading this work. The other thing is a prayer specifically. There's a couple things I pray for our missionaries regularly, and so those who would remember our missionaries could pray this with me. I pray first that the Lord would keep them healthy, and then second, that the Lord will give them fruit. And those things are intertwined. You know, some men live in difficult places. It's hard to sustain life and health out there, and you don't get much work done when you're not healthy. So just praying that in those hard places that the Lord keeps them strong and healthy, spiritually, mentally, physically, and that the Lord gives them fruit. We're so dependent upon the Lord for that. As you know, in your ministry here, and I know you've seen the Lord change people's lives on a weekly basis, so many great things happening here, but Pastor Jerry, you don't have the capacity to save a single soul. And so your dependence upon the Lord for the fruit of the work of this church, I think, is a part of now the Lord's giving that fruit. We want to have that same kind of dependence. We want to be, we don't have the ability to save anyone. The Spirit of God does. How do we tap into the power of the Spirit? Is through prayer. So praying on behalf of those missionaries, praying for the lost, that the Lord would give fruit, raise up more workers for the harvest. The Lord said, ask for that. And then, Lord, keep them healthy, keep them strong, and give them fruit.
Yeah, well, the whole time you're talking, I'm just thinking John 15, apart from me, you can do nothing.
Amen.
Just that abiding in the vine. And it is so important for these missionaries who, I've never even thought about it until you were just saying it, but just the discouragement that can come, and they're working, and they're planting seeds, and they're watering seeds, and to see that fruit, I'm sure is so very encouraging. What a great prayer request to pray. Well, last thing I want to ask, we call this the Forward Podcast. Forward is just kind of a theme of my life. It's kind of a word for me. I always like to look straight ahead and move forward. And I know being the president of the International Mission Board, you never take the pastor hat off. So putting the pastor hat on, to people listening who, the series of the Christian life is a series of new beginnings, is what it said. And we're about pressing on. If there's somebody listening and maybe they're a little discouraged in their walk with the Lord, and they're just having trouble putting one foot in front of the other, how would you encourage them to keep moving forward in their walk with Jesus?
Well, just know there are seasons for all of us. Season of challenge, season of difficulty, season of joy, season of harvest, season of sowing. And just to trust the Lord in whatever season He has you in. The Lord, He's working a plan here that is going to be completed. We get to be a part of that. We point often in our work, it's the vision for the IMB. It's really not the vision for the IMB. It's the vision the Lord has given the church. It's John's vision, Revelation 7, 9, and 10, where John's able to look into heaven. And in that look into heaven, John says, I looked and behold, a great multitude that no one could number from every nation, all peoples, tribes, and languages standing before the throne and before the Lamb. That vision is going to come to pass. It will come to pass through pain and sacrifice of God's people as He uses us. It'll come to pass through joyous times of harvest and celebration. But wherever the Lord has you, just keep looking at that vision. Know it's going to come to pass. We will be standing there before the throne someday. What a joy it will be to look around and see those who are there, because God, in some small way, let us be a part. Used us, whether it was our praying, giving, going, sending, whether it was the difficult, hard path that we walked in seasons of life, or the joyous and wonderful. So all of that is a part of the Lord working in and through us to fulfill what ultimately matters, what eternity is rushing towards, and that is that great multitude before the throne and before the Lamb singing His praises.
Beautiful. Great word. Dr. Chitwood, thanks so much for being with us today and just sharing your heart. Grateful for you and praying for God's best in the days ahead.
Thank you so much. Privileged to be with you always, my brother.